My name is Isabella. For 29 years, I have been the background noise in my own family's highlight reel. To my parents, I was the responsible one, which was just code for the daughter they never had to actually look at. We were sitting in a glass-walled penthouse in Manhattan, supposedly celebrating my brother Tyler's big promotion, but they had no idea. No idea that 3 weeks ago, I sold my company for $350 million. While Tyler was busy bragging, I was quietly holding the match that would burn their world down. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Let me know your story down in the comments. I would also love to hear where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love knowing who is part of our community. The air in the penthouse smelled like expensive mahogany and hypocrisy. My father, Mark, leaned back in his leather chair, swirling a vintage red wine that probably cost more than my first car. My mother, Stephanie, was busy adjusting the floral centerpiece, her eyes never leaving Tyler. Tyler, 33 and currently wearing a watch that cost as much as a small down payment, was in the middle of a story about his unrivaled success in luxury real estate. I sat at the far end of the table, the spare seat. The seat where they put the person they forgot to invite until the last second. My role was simple: nod, smile, and stay out of the way of the golden child's light. For years, I had been the silent investor in their version of family, paying in patience while they overdrew their emotional accounts on Tyler. "Isabella, honey," my father said, finally acknowledging my existence. He did not look at me, though. He was looking at a legal folder he had just placed beside his plate. Tyler's firm is going through a bit of a transition. High-end growth requires liquidity. Tyler's firm gave him a vanity promotion for optics, but his personal accounts have run dry. He's been faking it until he makes it for too long, and now the bank is circling. The overdue HOA maintenance fees and property tax liens on this penthouse are staggering. Around $100,000 is due immediately just to stop the foreclosure filing for the upcoming quarter. I took a slow sip of water. I did not ask why he was telling me this. I knew the tone. It was the sound of a contract being rewritten without my consent. "We need you to cover it," my mother chimed in, her voice sweet and toxic. "You have always been so steady with your engineering job, and since Tyler is focused on the big picture, it is only fair you contribute to the family status. We have already used most of our spare cash to help Tyler with his recent expansion." Tyler let out a sharp, condescending laugh. "Come on, Mom. Do not press her too hard. She is busy with that cute little startup of hers. What do you call it? Eco-grid, saving the planet one recycled bottle at a time?" He smirked at me the same look he gave me when he was 10 and I was 7, right before he broke my toys to see if I would cry. I did not cry then. I was not going to cry now. My emotions were no longer a resource they could exploit. "It is Eco-grid, Tyler," I said, my voice clinical, "and we specialize in municipal-scale sustainable energy coordination." Right, Tyler waved a hand dismissively. "Little green fantasy land. Look, we are talking about real money here, Manhattan money. $100,000 is not something you make by worrying about carbon footprints. How much is your little worthless business even worth? Does it even make a profit?" I set my glass down. The sound of the crystal hitting the table was the only noise in the room. I looked him dead in the eye, my gaze steady and cold. I was not having a breakdown. I was looking at a balance sheet. "I sold Eco-grid 3 weeks ago," I said, keeping my tone almost bored. Tyler's smirk did not fade immediately. He thought I was playing a desperate game. "Oh? Did you sell it for a few grand to some other dreamer?" "No." "Tyler, you've been trying to get a meeting with Bella Vance of Eco-grid for months, haven't you? You never realized Vance was Grandma's maiden name, the identity I used to build my empire far away from your shadow. I sold that company for $350 million. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the air out of the room. My mother's hand stopped mid-air near the roses. My father's fork slipped from his fingers, clattering against the fine china like a gunshot. Tyler's jaw actually dropped. His face went from smug to ghostly pale in less than 3 seconds. This was not a family dinner anymore, it was accounting. And for the first time in my life, I was the one holding all the equity. The silence in the penthouse was absolute, but in my head, it was finally quiet. For nearly 3 decades, their voices had been a constant drone of Tyler's potential and Tyler's future, a background noise that taught me to be invisible in my own home. They looked at my calm expression now and saw coldness, but they did not understand the years of temperature-controlled survival it took to get to this table. I remembered the year Tyler decided to find himself in Europe, using the money my parents had saved for their golden years. While he was taking filtered photos in front of the Coliseum, I was working 3 separate jobs. I was a junior civil engineer by day, a tutor by evening, and a freelance data analyst in the dead of night, just to keep the lights on in a studio apartment that smelled like cheap coffee and desperation. Every cent I earned that did not go to rent or ramen went into the cloud servers for EcoGrid. I was an invisible architect, building a world they called a tech fantasy, while they emptied their retirement accounts to fund Tyler's condos and luxury lifestyle. People often watch stories like mine and ask why the ignored child does not just leave sooner. They do not see the invisible chains. For 29 years, I lived in a prison without bars, a psychological state of learned helplessness. When every achievement you reach is met with a distracted shrug, and every request for help is used as evidence that you are difficult, you stop trying to climb the walls. You just learn to breathe in the shade. My silence at these dinners was not weakness. It was a cage I had been trained to build around myself since I was a child, a defense mechanism for a girl who was never chosen first. I thought about the time I won a prestigious statewide engineering award, and my mother merely asked if I could pick up Tyler's dry cleaning on the way home, because he was so busy with real clients. I had learned early that my value in this family was entirely transactional. If I was useful, I was tolerated. If I had needs, I was a burden. So I simply stopped having needs. I stopped asking for a seat at their table and started building my own empire in the dark. Tyler's face was still a frozen mask of disbelief, his mind likely racing to find a way to discredit the numbers I had just dropped. He could not grasp that the backup plan daughter had just outpaced his entire career trajectory in a single afternoon. I felt no pity as I watched his world tilt. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for decades, and the account was now permanently closed. This was not a family dinner. It was a long overdue audit of their behavior. My father finally found his breath, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the mahogany table. 350 million? He whispered the number, tasting like ash in his mouth. He was not looking at me with love, or even relief that I was successful. He was looking at me like a massive investment he had accidentally ignored until the market peaked. I knew, before he even finished his breath, that his next move would be the most expensive lesson of their lives. The temperature in the penthouse plummeted, and for a moment, the only sound was the hum of the climate control system struggling to filter the tension. My mother was the first to find her social mask again, though it was cracked and peeling at the edges. She did not offer a congratulatory hug or a smile of relief. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice trembling with a new, sharper kind of desperation. Isabella, if this is true, then why on earth would you let us worry like this? We are a family, we share our burdens, and we share our successes. Success? That was a word she only used when it belonged to Tyler. I had been their primary burden for years, at least in her narrative. The low-maintenance daughter who was expected to stay out of the way. But now that my financial account was in the black by 9 figures, she wanted to talk about a merger of interests. It was a classic corporate pivot, an attempt to restructure our relationship now that my market value had skyrocketed. Tyler did not stay silent for long. The sickly paleness of his face was replaced by a flush of indignant rage. You think you're better than us now? You sat there and watched Dad stress over my project, knowing you had $350 million in the bank? That's cold, Isabella. Even for you. I leaned back, crossing my arms. I did not feel the need to raise my voice. In this room, I wasn't a daughter defending her feelings. I was a CEO reviewing a toxic asset. I'm not being cold, Tyler, I said, my voice level and professional. I'm being objective. Your accusations are just bad debt I'm no longer willing to carry. I watched you spend $100,000 on a luxury watch while Dad emptied his retirement to save your failing developments, Tyler. If we are talking about being cold, let's look at the climate you created for everyone in this room. My father did not look at me. His eyes were fixed on the legal folder he had brought to the table. He opened it slowly, his movements methodical and weary, stripped of the booming authority he usually carried. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it toward me, right over the plate of half-eaten holiday ham. Since you're doing so well, he began, his voice taking on a hard transactional edge, this should not be an issue for you. This is a waiver for your inheritance of the family's estate in the country. Tyler needs the equity to secure a new line of credit for his real estate project. Without it, The bank will pull his funding by the end of the month. I looked at the document. It was a standard quitclaim deed, prepared with clinical efficiency. They were not asking for my help. They were demanding a bailout. They wanted me to sign away my history to fund Tyler's future, as if my own success was just another resource for them to strip mine. You want me to sign away my share of the only legacy Grandpa left us? I asked. I did not sound hurt. I sounded like I was reviewing a feasibility study for a project that was already underwater. It is the responsible thing to do, my mother added, her eyes fixed on the paper. Tyler is building something that will last. You have your $350 million now. You do not need that old house. Think about the family name, Isabella. Do not be selfish. Selfish. The word was a heavy, blunt instrument they had used to keep me in line for 29 years, but I was no longer susceptible to that particular frequency of guilt. I picked up the silver pen my father had placed on top of the document. I felt the weight of it, cold and solid, in my hand. I did not sign it. I just looked at the ink, then back at the three people who had spent my entire life pretending I was invisible until I became profitable. They were asking for a professional favor after a lifetime of personal neglect. That was a high-interest loan they could never afford to pay back. I looked at the silver pen, its polished surface reflecting the flickering candlelight of a dinner that was never meant for me. Then I looked at the paper, a legal document designed to strip me of my last tie to the family's history, while I was expected to smile and thank them for the privilege. My mother's voice was still echoing in the room, calling me selfish because I now had $350 million and did not want to share. You talk about the family name. Mom, I said, my voice clinical, devoid of the heat they were expecting. But let's talk about the family ledger. I did not touch the pen. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila envelope. I laid it on the table with the precision of a surgeon. I slid 4 documents across the mahogany surface. They were certified copies of the withdrawal slips from my educational trust, the $100,000 my grandfather left for me. Tyler, do you remember the summer I turned 18? The year Dad said the fund vanished because of the market? It was actually you. You used their trust to gain access and drained the account to fund your first condo. It has been 11 years of compounded interest and lost opportunities since that day. I watched my father's eyes scan the pages, then dart toward Tyler. The signature at the bottom is mine, I continued, my gaze never leaving, Tyler shaking hands. But I never signed those. My lawyers ran a forensic handwriting analysis last week. The pressure points and the slant match your handwriting perfectly, Tyler. And the notary stamp? That belongs to your assistant's cousin. The room fell into a silence so sharp it felt like it could draw blood. Tyler's jaw tightened, his breathing becoming shallow. He was not the golden child anymore. He was a cornered animal caught in the glare of a truth he could not outrun. My mother began to tremble, her eyes welling with tears that I knew were for the loss of her image, not for the betrayal of her daughter. In that moment, I saw the illusion of power in an empty wallet for exactly what it was. My family had spent decades treating me like I was less than because I did not chase shallow trophies, but their entire existence was built on sand. They were not powerful, they were merely people with expensive tastes and no means to fund them. Their authority was a costume they wore while they looted my accounts to pay for the rental on their reputation. There is a profound emptiness in people who define their worth by what they have, rather than who they are. They had confused a high credit limit with high character. Looking at them now, they looked pathetic. The responsible daughter was no longer the silent investor in their lives. I was the one closing the books. I am not signing your waiver, I said, picking up the pen and dropping it back onto the table with a final metallic click. And I am not paying the maintenance fees for this penthouse. In fact, we are going to talk about a very different kind of transaction. Tyler's arrogance didn't just crack. It disintegrated. He looked at the bank statements on the table, his fingers twitching against the mahogany surface as if trying to erase the ink with his touch. Isabella, wait, he stammered, his voice losing its polished Manhattan vibrato and dropping into a jagged, desperate whisper. You do not understand. The development project, the New Heights Tower. We've been losing millions because we cannot meet the city's energy compliance mandates. We've been trying to hire a firm called EcoGrid to handle the entire grid coordination for months. We were told the founder was a ghost. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I did not see an older brother who stood in the light. I saw a bad asset that was about to be liquidated. I know, Tyler. I was the one who personally rejected your firm's application 3 separate times, I said, my voice clinical and steady. I flagged your company as a high-risk entity with unstable leadership and questionable ethical standards. That was before I sold the company. And the new owners? They have an ironclad policy against working with developers who are under investigation for trust fund fraud. Isabella, please. Tyler's voice broke completely. He actually pushed back his chair and stood up, moving toward my end of the table with his hands outstretched. The smug golden child was gone, replaced by a cornered man who realized his entire empire was built on a foundation of stolen money and forged signatures. If we do not get that eco-grid platform, the investors will pull out by Monday. I will lose the penthouse. I will lose everything. You have $350 million now. $100,000 is nothing to you. I stood up slowly, pulling my coat over my shoulders with a precision that felt foreign and powerful. I did not feel the surge of anger I had carried for 29 years. I did not feel the need to scream. I just felt the quiet, cold satisfaction of a balanced ledger. You are right, Tyler. $100,000 is nothing to me now. But your integrity is worth even less. And that watch you're wearing? Don't bother selling it. I know it's a lease, just like the rest of your reputation. Even if it were real, it wouldn't cover a fraction of the interest you owe me for the years you spent living off my stolen future. I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out a second legal folder. I did not set it down gently. I dropped it onto the table right in front of my father. It contained a formal demand letter and a drafted complaint for the misappropriation of funds. It demands the immediate return of the $100,000 plus exactly 11 years of compounded interest. I've calculated every cent from the day I turned 18 to this very moment. You have 24 hours to transfer the funds. If the account isn't settled by tomorrow morning, this draft will be filed officially. And the next time you receive legal papers, it won't be from me. It will be a process server delivering them in front of your entire office. We are your parents, Isabella, my mother cried out, her voice high and shrill, finally realizing that the low-maintenance daughter had just disconnected the life support for their social status. How can you be so heartless to your own family? I am not being heartless, I replied, as I began to walk toward the door of the penthouse. I am just letting the market decide your value. You taught me that every relationship is a transaction, and you have been in the red with me for a long, long time. Now, the debt is due. I did not look back as I stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut on the sight of Tyler collapsing into his chair and my parents staring at the demand letter like it was an eviction notice for their souls. As the elevator descended toward the street level, I realized this was not a breakdown. It was the ultimate accounting. I was finally stepping out of the box they had shoved me into and walking into a world that I had built myself. The penthouse that once felt like the summit of the world was now nothing more than an evidence locker for a life built on sand. Tyler's development project, the one my parents had bankrolled with their very future, collapsed within 60 days of that dinner. Without the EcoGrid coordination platform, his firm could not meet the city's green energy mandates, and the investors fled like it was a sinking ship, which, in reality, it was. I heard through legal channels that the $100,000 restitution plus the 11 years of compounded interest forced my father to liquidate almost everything. They traded their Manhattan lifestyle for a small apartment in a part of the city they used to look down on. Tyler is no longer a future partner anywhere. Last I heard, he was working as a junior analyst at a firm that does not care about his last name or his former penthouse. I did not stay to watch the walls close in on them. My life is no longer a footnote in Tyler's story. I used a significant portion of my $350 million to establish the Invisible Architect Foundation. We provide technical grants and mentorship to innovators who have been pushed to the margins, people whose brilliant ideas were called tech fantasies by those who were supposed to support them. Every time I sign a check for a student who is told to be realistic, I feel a sense of justice that no bank balance could ever provide. I am building a legacy now, not out of duty to a bloodline that betrayed me, but out of a commitment to the talent that the world almost missed. I've come to realize that the most dangerous thing about being the ignored child is not the silence. It is that you start to believe the people around you have the right to define your worth. If you find yourself in a similar situation, remember, their inability to see your light does not mean you are not glowing. It just means they were never the right audience for your masterpiece. Forgiveness is not always about reconciliation. Sometimes it's just about closing the ledger so you can finally move on to a new project. I have forgiven them for my own peace of mind, but I have also set boundaries that are ironclad. I am not their retirement plan, and I am not a resource to be mined. I am Isabella, and I am finally independent. To the ones who always feel like they are at the edge, this letter is for you. I know the specific ache of being the responsible one, the one who is expected to be fine while others receive the praise and the resources. I know what it is like to have your successes treated like accidents and your needs treated like an inconvenience. But here is the secret I learned in that cold penthouse. Being ignored made you dangerous. Because nobody was watching, you were free to build your own strength without their interference. You learned to survive on your own terms, and that is a power they can never take away. You built your world in the dark, and now you are ready to burn so brightly that they will not even be able to look at you. I spent 29 years wondering why I was not enough to be chosen. Now, I understand that I was always more than enough. They just did not have the capacity to measure someone of my scale. Do not waste your life trying to get people to open their eyes when they have already decided to stay blind. Just keep building. Keep innovating. Keep choosing yourself. Eventually, the life you build will be so beautiful that the opinion of your family will just be background noise that you finally have the power to turn off. If Isabella's journey has given you strength, please like and share this video. Do not ever let anyone define your value but yourself.